it's sort of broken just in the last very short while. We were watching President Trump in the White House doing one of those sort of impromptu things. He had the leader of El Salvador beside him, but he was asked about Ukraine. No surprise about that, and maybe in some ways no great surprise about his answer. But it did sort of make you blink when he gave this thought on the aggression in Ukraine and had this to say about Volodymyr Zelenskyy.
The mistake was letting the war happen. If Biden were competent and if Zelenskyy were competent, and I don't know that he is, we had a rough session with this guy over here. He just kept asking for more and more. That war should have never been allowed to happen. That war, I went 4 years and Putin wouldn't even bring it up. And as soon as the election was rigged and I wasn't here, that war started. There was no way that war should have been allowed to happen.
Okay, and the president, he was very clear, wasn't he? He laid the blame on Volodymyr Zelenskyy for the outbreak of the war in pretty explicit terms. He's made those points, in different ways in the past, but this time it was pretty bold. Have a listen.
Have you spoken to President Zelenskyy, sir, about his offer to purchase more Patriot missile batteries?
Oh, I don't know. He's always looking to purchase missiles. He's against. Listen. When you start a war, you got to know that you can win the war, right? You don't start a war against somebody that's 20 times your size and then hope that people give you some missiles.
Starting the war. What do you think?
He'd have done well to have started a war several years before he was elected president of Ukraine. This is now hardcore levels of Kremlin propaganda coming out of the White House, and I don't think there's many people listening that would ever think they would see the day. And it just leads me to go, what's Putin got on him? Why would you be coming out with this sort of stuff? I know he's petty and he sort of falls out with people, and what he tends to do, according to those in Trump world, is he makes up with them, but he makes sure he humiliates them as well. I don't know where we go from here, John. Again, last time I was here, we were talking about how America is no longer a ally that can be relied on, and he's just drifting further and further away from the natural world order that many of us have known most of our lives. This is very scary stuff.
I know.
Well, I think that comment is no longer surprising, which I think is a testament to how far we've gone in the last 3 months. It is certainly shocking, but, there is personal history between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelenskyy. It would be nice to almost see that acknowledged because it is so personal. It's because Zelenskyy refused his request years ago to help him essentially take down Joe Biden. So it's extremely political. It's very personal, and it is also part of the MAGA playbook to constantly paint Zelenskyy as someone who is always essentially trying to get more out of the American people, get more out of the American government, and like all propaganda lines, because there is a hint of truth, because obviously he is going around for the national interest, trying to drum up support. That's what he's been doing during the war.
It's the idea that Ukraine started the war.
I mean, it's obviously false, and it is pretty insulting, considering it's come the day after yet another Russian strike on a city. But I think it is where we have been, that the actual position hasn't changed, and the politics of it hasn't changed, and it increasingly feeds into the push politically of Donald Trump. I mean, this interpretation that what he wants is a change of leadership in Ukraine.
Yes.
And he himself started that conversation. Then, if we remember, very bizarrely, a couple of weeks ago, said he was very angry with Putin for suggesting the same. Yeah. Having said that, so I wouldn't be surprised if in a few days' time, when someone repeats this comment, he says how outraged he is by it, because that is how volatile we are in. That is how volatile he is as a leader. But where it leaves Ukraine is certainly not in a good position right now.
And he called out President Zelensky's leadership.
The mistake was letting the war happen. If Biden were competent and if Zelenskyy were competent, and I don't know that he is, we had a rough session with this guy over here. He just kept asking for more and more. That war should have never been allowed to happen. That war, I went 4 years and Putin wouldn't even bring it up. And as soon as the election was rigged and I wasn't here, that war started. There was no way that war should have been allowed to happen.
So having started there by saying at least Putin was the one who started the war, then rolled back on even that, talking about, well, have a listen.
Have you spoken to President Zelenskyy, sir, about his offer to purchase more Patriot missile batteries?
Oh, I don't know. He's always looking to purchase missiles. He's against. Listen, when you start a war, you got to know that you can win the war, right? You don't start a war against somebody that's 20 times your size and then hope that people give you some missiles.
Well, Harriet Alexander in the United States, what went through your mind listening to that?
Well, I think the first part that I thought was really interesting was when he said Putin should never have started it, because actually coming from Donald Trump, that's quite the admission. He has for a long time refused to even accept that fact. He said that Biden should never have let it happen. He says that all the time. But to sort of admit that it was actually Vladimir Putin who invaded, I thought was quite interesting and I suppose encouraging. But then, of course, he went on to say that Zelenskyy should not have started the war because he should have known he could never win.
Yes.
So, you know, it was pretty contradictory from Trump. It didn't really make a lot of sense and had nothing to do really with the facts on the ground.
Yeah, well, the one thing sort of neutralised the other, so it wasn't a clear chain of reasoning there. But I mean, in some ways, we've heard some of that from the president already in the past, and maybe more than once. When you hear it that way, that simply expressed, it still makes you rather pause and blink. But then, after the weekend that we have seen, where we've seen so many Ukrainian civilians killed in apartment blocks, in an attack on a hospital, you again ask yourself that the president has got the power to put real pressure on the leader of Russia. He's spoken about taking on those vessels carrying Russian oil to various parts of the world, hitting those customers for that oil. No sign of that. And you just wonder when or if he's going to act at all, don't you, Harriet?
Yeah, and I think he is probably quite frustrated that this is not as easy to solve as he thought. Do you remember he campaigned on this idea that I will get it solved on day one? We're a long way past that, of course, and I think he is increasingly angry that Putin is not doing as he wants. He's angry, very angry, obviously, that Zelenskyy is not doing what he wants. Although Zelenskyy seems to be now the one who's trying to sort of bring things back together and to get momentum again behind this. I mean, it's true that Trump has put renewed momentum on the idea of a ceasefire, on the idea of resolving this. Putin is the one who has had his back against the wall and is saying he's not going to take this. Trump has admitted that he's concerned about what Putin is doing and that Putin is not necessarily playing a straight game with this. But yeah, I think Trump is angry that it's happening and he doesn't really want anything to do with it.
Yeah, well, I guess the question is, what is he going to do about it at the moment? Because there are cards that he has to play. To use his favourite card-playing analogy, and so far the big cards have not been played.